When Rivian first announced the R1T, I was absolutely over the moon, and I said, shut up, take my money, and I pre-ordered one absolutely as soon as I possibly could, within the first minute of pre-orders. How it took me so long to end up getting one, that's a tale for a different episode, because I know a lot of people that did not put their pre-order in right away that suspiciously got their Rivian R1T before I did. At any rate, again, topic for a different video. But the reason I was so over the moon for the Rivian R1T is because of its particular blend of features. It has a tight turning radius. It's not as big as a half-ton truck, although dimensionally it's a little bit closer than you might think. It has the promise of high towing ability, 11,000 pounds, high payload ability, a relatively practical bed. It's about 4 feet wide in bed, so you can definitely put 4 feet wide things in there, although the bed itself is about a foot shorter than the average full-size truck. It has a slightly smaller back end, but that makes this easier to park. It also has a practical front trunk there, and the adaptive air suspension will give you up to 15 inches of ground clearance. This is the ultimate towing electric off-roady mid-sized luxury truck. It has an absolutely gorgeous interior as well. But one of the big reasons that I bought the R1T in the first place was because I tow regularly. I regularly tow with a Dodge Durango at the moment, and back when I pre-ordered the Rivian, I chose to lease my Durango because I wasn't sure when the Rivian would come out if I would want the Rivian instead of the Durango, and I wanted that ability to just get rid of it easily after 3 years. Of course, it ended up being 4 years until I got the Rivian, and that meant I ended up with another Durango, oddly enough. Now the question for me is, do I keep this or do I keep the Durango? Now, when it comes to towing, tow rating on this is higher than the Durango. That's just over 8,000 pounds. This is 11,000 pounds, but I'm not a fan of the way that it tows. Let's talk about that. Now, full disclosure, it's early days at Rivian. This is one of the first few thousand R1Ts that Rivian has ever built, and they're a startup company. They've never built anything before. Some of my complaints can obviously be addressed in software, and they are likely to be over time, but some are hardware issues with the R1T, like the positioning of the hitch. The receiver is recessed really far under the bumper. That makes it a little bit more difficult with some trailers to connect them. You can see here's where we put the safety chains on. These are also a little on the thick side, so a little bit difficult to put some of those chains on. We do have a 7-pin wiring harness connection with all the brake controller stuff pre-wired in, so that is a nice touch. The Durango, by no means the most towing-focused SUV ever created. The hitch actually sticks out beyond the bumper, which is why Durangos from the factory have kind of a weird bulge back here on the cover. Although not as practical as the average truck, this is far more practical for regular towers as far as connecting and disconnecting the hitch, etc. You have to crawl under the vehicle an awful lot less. We also have a 4-pin wiring harness connection in addition to the 7-pin, which is a really nice touch. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be using a load leveling hitch because I am going to put over 5,000 pounds on this 26-foot flatbed here. Now, this particular hitch shank is not the longest, and again, that can be a little bit tricky because of where that's located there. Now, personally, I'm lazy, and I find myself frequently in a rush when I need to tow. This arrangement definitely takes more time, and you really have to get down here on the ground to see what's going on because of how far back in there everything is. But perhaps more important, let's align this little tiny camera to the view of that hitch. You can see that it's kind of looking at it from the side. You can definitely see if they're lined up. But if the camera was, say, up here, where it is in most pickup trucks, then not only would you be able to see that it's in a line, but you'd be able to see when the ball right there is under the receiver. With practice, I'm sure this would become a non-issue. Let's see if I can do this with just one hand while I hold the camera here in the other. I might be too far, but let's find out. That looks kind of okay. It does look a little bit odd on the inside versus what it should be on the outside. Nope, I am just a little bit too far. Let's go back in. Again, this would be handier if it had an overhead view. Now it's time to either lower the jack or raise the air suspension. This is a handy feature in here, so I could just hop inside and I could go to the off-road mode and choose go off-road, hey, why not? And then go to the highest height mode, which is going to raise the vehicle up by about 5 inches. So it should just pop right there into the receiver. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the camera to see how that's going back there. And yep, it just popped right in place. With that in place and the vehicle still raising up, it's going to be a lot easier to lower that jack. With the trailer hooked up, what better way to test the towing capabilities of my new vehicle than having it tow my old tow vehicle? Let's get things into position. So let's set the stage. This is a PJ Trailers 6-inch channel tilt bed trailer. This trailer weighs a little over 3,600 pounds in its own right. The Durango weighs a little under 5,400 pounds according to the spec sheet. That is, of course, the Durango 392, so it has a 6.4 liter V8 engine. This is a tilt bed multi-use trailer, so you can use it for towing vehicles, heavy loads, things like that. Has a hydraulic strut in there to help slow down the bed tilting. You can kind of speed it up by hopping on it. And there we go. Let's load her up. And that's why tilt trailers are cool. Oh, hey, and look at that. Can even open the door. Now we just lock the tilt bed into place so we don't have any unintentional tilting. And then we get to the strapping. All right, let's talk about the vehicle configuration now. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the air conditioning because it is kind of toasty today. I apologize because the air conditioning here in the Rivian is a little on the loud side, as you're probably gonna hear as it ramps up. Now, when you have a trailer connected to the vehicle, it's automatically gonna ask if you want to go into towing mode. I went ahead and said yes. There are a few things you can still adjust before you move, but some are only adjustable in park, as you can see. So I can go for the high brake regen ability. This does not have a blended braking system like we find in the F-150 Lightning. This is more like a Tesla, where the throttle liftoff regen is all you get. Stiff ride is probably what we want to help keep from getting on any bump stops. Trailer brake control, that you can adjust when you're underway. Now, if you want to adjust the ride height, you can adjust the ride height in tow mode, depending on the height of your trailer. Rivian doesn't seem to give too much detail about exactly what effect that might have on the vehicle's stability, etc. I didn't really notice much of a difference there, but you can lower the ride height down to 10.1 inches, as you see right there, or 11.5. It's not an enormous difference in terms of that. Now, some of these settings can be adjusted if you were to, while you're underway, move over here to all purpose, and you choose exit towing. Then you can adjust a few things, then you can go back into towing while you're out on the road. Now for some important things to know. Not all the vehicle's adaptive systems will function the same when we're in towing mode. For instance, if I try and engage adaptive cruise control, that's not going to work. If I just engage it with this double click of the shifter, I get only regular cruise control when we're underway. The trailer brake controller is this little knob right here, which is used for other functions in the system, but while the trailer is connected and it's in tow mode, I press and hold, then you'll see that little icon right there indicating that the trailer brake has been activated. And the last thing to know is my battery state of charge, because a lot of folks are going to ask about this. I charged the vehicle up to 90%. I connected the trailer, and now you can see on the app it says it's 89% there. It took 1% battery just hanging out here and running the air conditioning, connecting the trailer, etc. I think that's a rational choice. Some drivers might choose to charge all the way up to 100%, but as we start going downhill, you'll notice there is going to be a problem. So let's just go ahead and get out on the road. Now that I'm underway, I got a message saying the side and the rear sensors are offline because I'm in tow mode. The rear sensors make sense because there's a trailer back there. Side sensors, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Other thing to know, if you're towing something that's especially wide or especially long, no tow mirrors on the Rivian R1T. It's not an option at the moment. That's something that I would love to see, especially with a vehicle that claims to have best in class for EV truck towing capability. 11,000 pounds, it's about 1,000 pounds more than we find in the F-150 Lightning. Now, the ride quality is really well done in the Rivian thanks to the adaptive air suspension system that is standard. You'll really notice that out on the gravel road that I'm on here. The other thing you're really going to notice is the traction. This is a 4-motor, full-time 4-wheel drive system, basically. So even if I come to a stop here and I'm around this little corner and I floor it, we get 4-wheel slip, lots of power. So you don't have to worry about 2-wheel pickup truck style traction. The other thing that takes a bit of getting used to is adjusting the trailer brake gain, which is something that I'm trying to do currently, taking a look back there at those trailer tires. And that seems to do mainly with the fact that there's pretty aggressive throttle liftoff regen even when this is set to standard. And that means that it's a little bit difficult to tell exactly what those tires back there are up to. On a slippery surface like this, it's a little bit easier. Of course, you can access the brake course again by pressing and holding on that little rotary dial there for emergency purposes, if you have some trailer sway going on, etc., and you want to bring it under control. Now, the other thing to know is this corner right here. I cannot turn this corner with this trailer with a half-ton truck, which is why I ended up getting the Durango rather than a half-ton, But that is one of the big advantages for this Rivian. It has a really tight turning radius, and that makes turns like that absolutely simple. No problem at all. The other thing that I like is the amount of regen braking that we do get out of this system. It's pretty aggressive. It helps keep your speed under control going downhill some of the time, most of the time. But when we get out on the road here, you'll see. Just this slight incline here before we've even gotten to the major downhill grade here, I already got a message saying regen braking is limited due to the battery state of charge. Now that is a tiny bit surprising because the battery is currently at 88% charge. And I would note that in a Lightning that I was briefly able to test at the launch event, it gave you more aggressive regen at a pretty similar battery state of charge. And a lot of EVs out there, by the time you've used about 5% of the battery, they're still giving you max regen. Rivian is being very, very conservative with their battery. They're recommending that you charge it only up to about 70% charge for normal operation, 80 or 90% for longer trips, and 100% only when you absolutely need to. And towing is kind of when you might absolutely need to. The unintended consequence that a lot of people might not consider is that the effect is you don't get much regen braking going downhill, and you get zero if it's 100%, which is why I stopped charging this battery at 90, because I knew that this towing run starts going downhill, not uphill. If you live in a hilly area, this is something you absolutely must keep in mind with any electric pickup truck, whether we're talking about this or the Lightning. But again, the experience is a little bit different in the Lightning. Now, this does a good job keeping the trailer under control speed-wise, as long as the amount of regen braking you need to do that is within the capability of the system. I'll have a deeper dive into towing range in a separate video, but right off the bat, you can see that the vehicle has already guesstimated that I'm gonna go down to 135 miles of range with this trailer attached. It is seemingly mildly predictive, so it's gonna use your previous towing experiences to try and give you a more true range. But unlike we find in the F-150, it doesn't allow you to have multiple different trailer profiles. And that's one of the really cool things with the Lightning, is that you can select trailer A, B, C, D, whatever, and it's going to use your actual towing numbers, basically with that trailer, or if none are available, the dimensions that you've entered and cloud-sourced information about that trailer to give you a more accurate estimation for mileage. Now, if I click on this little button right here, it will tell me that if I was in conserve mode, it thinks that I would go 298 miles, 326 miles if I'd had the extra 10% of the battery left. So that's the kind of towing range reduction that the vehicle is estimating so far. We're about halfway down the hill now, and the battery has already picked up the 2% state of charge that we consumed in the driveway, so definitely a lot of regen braking going on here. One thing I've noticed, however, out here on this winding section of the road is the way this air suspension is tuned, it feels a little bit unsettled with the trailer connected. It doesn't feel like the average half-ton truck, or honestly the average SUV, even a smaller SUV like a Durango or a Land Rover Discovery or a BMW X5, etc. I think that has to do with the suspension design in the Rivian, which is a little bit different than the average truck. It doesn't really seem to be a dynamic problem in the Rivian, to be honest. It's really more of a feeling thing. So it's something that you're just going to have to get used to as you start driving the Rivian. Now, around that corner, I definitely had to use the friction brakes. Regen braking simply wasn't cutting it for keeping that trailer under control speed-wise. The other thing I'm noticing out here on this winding road section that's a little bit undulating is that the trailer sway control in the Rivian is really hyperactive, and I can feel it braking one wheel or the other as you're going over some of these sections. Now, I'm going 38 miles an hour. I am not going quick for this road surface. I can go faster in a half-ton truck with the same load. Speed limit here is 45 miles an hour, and even with a trailer, that is perfectly acceptably safe. It just seems to do with the way that the nannies in this truck are programmed. Now, this is another area where Rivian could issue a software update and completely fix this, so this is probably something that's in the works, I would assume, assuming enough people have complained about it. It does lead to some of that different feeling that we find in the Rivian, and that's, again, the best thing to say about this. But it does add to the different feel that we find in the Rivian when towing, and that's probably the easiest way to describe this, is that it feels markedly different than the average truck. Okay, it's time for a rough and unofficial acceleration run. Let's go ahead and start. Absolutely floored, insane amount of power. This thing peels out like there is no tomorrow, and we went 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds with 9,000 pounds on the back. What makes that 0 to 60 time even more epic is that the Rivian itself weighs over 7,100 pounds. So this combination is over 16,000 pounds of actual curb weight. 9,000 pounds in the back, 7,000 pounds right here in the truck. And this will go 0 to 60 faster than a Nissan Rogue or a Toyota RAV4. And this combination is about 4 times heavier than those vehicles. This is an absolutely insane amount of performance thanks to the 4 electric motors that give us over 800 combined horsepower. Out here on this relatively level section of highway, the other thing you'll notice when towing in the Rivian is that this is not as isolated as the average body-on-frame truck. And that's because the Rivian is kind of sort of a hybrid, I guess you'd say. Instead of a typical truck frame where we have independent things connected to the frame, including the body on top and the bed in the back, which are not the same piece, in the Rivian, the bed and the body are one piece, and then they are connected to the battery skateboard in the vehicle. How much isolation there is between the one and the other, that's a little bit difficult to say, but it is clearly less than you get in the average pickup truck. Of course, the trailer is connected to the frame in the vehicle, which is that battery skateboard module. That's where the suspension is connected. That's where the electric motors, etc., are as well. What I notice out on this road surface is not the hitch rattling around in the receiver, like you do notice in unibody SUVs and crossovers, but there's kind of this weird hesitation or surging in the way the power is delivered, things are going down the road. It's not as refined as a lot of tow vehicles out there. The other thing, again, the ADAS systems, they deactivate mainly here. So right now I have regular cruise control, no autonomous emergency braking, no auto braking with the cruise control at all. I think that's a bit of a misstep because in, say, a General Motors pickup truck, not only do you get radar adaptive cruise control, let's be honest, you get that in pretty much every truck, even when you're towing in those trucks. You also get the availability of their hands-free driving system, Super Cruise, while you're towing a trailer. That definitely adds to some long-distance comfort. Of course, long-distance comfort is a little bit relative because on this relatively short run here so far, where again, speed is about 56 miles an hour, I've been averaging 1.43 miles per kilowatt hour. So definitely a reduction of what this is gonna do absolutely empty, although a little bit better than I had expected. Now, as I turn over here onto California 17 North, you can expect that number to flip the opposite direction and end up more on the kilowatt hours per mile side of things. Going up some of these slower grades here where the traffic in front is slowing down and then we're trying to accelerate gradually again, you'll really notice that surging feel. It kind of feels like we're driving over a series of very small speed bumps. It is particularly unusual and something that I have not experienced in towing with any other hybrid or plug-in hybrid vehicle, or of course the Ford Lightning. Now, we're essentially at the summit of Highway 17, so let's do a quick recap of the hill climb. 15.5 miles since I reset the odometer there, and 0.7 miles per kilowatt hour. So definitely, as I said, below 1 mile per kilowatt hour. Although it is worth noting that the Hummer EV, just tootling down the road on its own, is right around 1 mile per kilowatt hour, and this has 9,000 pounds in the back. So if you want to look at it that way, quite a bit more efficient than a Hummer EV. Where the Silverado EV lines up, we just don't know yet. Another critical thing to keep in mind is that over 15.5 miles, we have consumed nearly 20% of the battery. So if you live in a hilly area, keep that in mind. You are going to see significant reductions in terms of real-world range. If you live in a level area, it's going to be a lot easier. And of course, depending on what you're towing, that's going to be easier or harder as well. Again, wait for that in a different video. With the battery now down here at 70%, you will notice a significant improvement in the amount of regen braking that we get here. So with this battery level, it's much easier to keep the trailer's speed in tow. However, it is worth noting that any sort of longer downhill stretches when regenning, the vehicle actually starts to taper off that regen ability, and it doesn't really have to be a terribly long or terribly steep slope. So as we are going down this next crest here, I'll show you what's going on here. So we need to keep our speed under control, so I'm going to go ahead and let off. We get max regen here. It's actually decelerating us as we're going downhill just as I need to, but the regen ability has now started to back off. Now I'm going to have to start digging into the friction brakes because, we started to really cook along there, and now we have to use the friction brakes in order to get that speed under control. This all seems to be because Rivian is being very conservative with their battery pack, and anytime you quickly charge or discharge a battery pack, you're going to reduce its lifetime. My intention with this video was not to talk about how far the Rivian can tow, but rather how it feels while you're towing. How easy is it to get things connected, how all the electronic systems work when a trailer's connected, all that sort of stuff. And more importantly, how does it really feel when it has a lot of weight on the back? But because a lot of people want to know about range, here's some basic numbers here for you. And I'm going to cover these in greater detail in a future video. When the 9,100 pound trailer was on the back, this averaged 1.2 miles per kilowatt hour. So theoretically, this battery could be exhausted in about 150 miles or so of towing that particular trailer, as long as you're on a similar route to me. So definitely very mountainous, lots of heavy uphill pulls. If, however, you're doing more of a combination of different driving styles out on the highway for long periods of time, going 60 miles an hour or so with a 3,000 pound box trailer that I had on this exact truck, it averaged 1.49 miles per kilowatt hour, so more like 200 miles or so of towing. If, on the other hand, you had, say, a 120-gallon fuel trailer, which I also have towed with this Rivian, it is considerably smaller, considerably more aerodynamic. It actually has a very narrow track, so it's entirely behind the aerodynamic profile of the Rivian. That averaged 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour, so about 300 miles of real-world towing with this exact truck right here. Now, this exact truck, without any trailer on the back, if you were driving it like you were towing, 60 miles an hour maximum, in California on that same drive route, it averaged 2.88 miles per kilowatt hour. So treat it gently, you can get 360 miles of range out of this battery. That should put things in perspective. And as always, the trailer that you're towing is going to have a big impact on your final range figures. Really just, it depends. There's so many different kinds of trailers out there, different profiles, different tires, etc. There's no easy answer to the how far can your truck tow. As to the how does the Rivian feel while it's towing, the feel is decidedly peculiar, I have to say. The way the air suspension and the stability control systems interact with one another, I suspect that's something that Rivian could fix. Again, something a little bit more difficult to fix are some of the camera views around the vehicle, most notably that rear view camera. But are any of these deal breakers for me in the Rivian when towing? I have to say no. They are annoyances, and having towed with trucks and SUVs, etc. regularly, they stick out on the Rivian more. But if you've never owned a truck before, or you don't tow very often, it's probably not going to be a huge deal. Instead, the bigger deal is going to be the kind of performance that you get out of the Rivian. Again, with 9,000 pounds on the back, this went 0 to 60 about as quick as a Nissan Rogue can do ever. Absolutely dry with just the driver in it. There is so much power on tap that passing uphill is absolutely effortless. Unlike a regular pickup truck or regular SUV that would have to downshift, there are no gears here, so it never has to downshift, you never have to wait for anything, you just press on the pedal and up the hill it goes. Now, One definite thing to keep in mind when towing is that, again, Regen braking is pretty limited going downhill at 90%, still fairly limited at 80%, even still a hair limited at 70% battery capacity. The same sort of limiting also happens at lower states of charge. When this battery was at around 30%, it appeared that the vehicle was limiting power at around 70 or 80% of total output, and it was definitely noticeable in some of the longer uphill stretches where maybe you just wanted to see if you could pass someone. There was no one in front of me, so I definitely put my foot down on the accelerator pedal a little bit. Wasn't trying to pass anybody, I just wanted to see what it could do, and you could definitely feel that limit in power. To put that in perspective, we're still talking about a lot of power. At the moment, my towing bottom line with the Rivian R1T is that my opinion is a little bit complicated. I love the amount of power that we find in the R1T, and I do really like the adaptive air suspension. But some of these components are probably why the R1T has sort of an unusual feel while towing. I suspect that given time, Rivian could correct a lot of these flaws again in software, and maybe that's giving Rivian a pass. Maybe I like the R1T a bit too much. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section. But at least for the moment, even though there are a few flaws, I have to say that none of them, for me at least, are deal breakers when it comes to towing with the R1T. That said, however, I think that towing with the Ford Lightning is much more of a normal truck experience. Be sure and hit that subscribe button down there. Find me over at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those other social places. And of course, check out all the other related Rivian R1T content on the channel also. I'll see all of you later.